Alrighty, we're going to try and go through our 7 intentions, and our 7 intentions can be encapsulated with one word for each intention, and that is repeal, investigate, decentralise, support, promote, abolish, return. So, number 1, we intend to repeal all legislation that works against the people and against the land. This is a big one because there is a lot of legislation that shouldn't be there. When legislation is enacted without democratic process or without public consultation, then that legislation is fraudulent. So there have been numerous occasions over the last 3 years where this government has passed legislation without any democratic process, without any public consultation. They've passed these legislations in the wee hours of the morning. So any legislation that has been found to have been passed without democratic process or public consultation, and especially when it is a piece of legislation that really seriously affects us all, they will be immediately repealed, all of them. I could go through and name them all, but there's not much point doing that. We know which ones they are. It's our intention to repeal those. Now, we can't actually just go through and selectively repeal legislation that has been found to have been enacted without democratic process, without doing a full review of all legislation. And I hear people saying that our democracy has been destroyed for the last 25 years. I hear people pointing to 1988 or somewhere in the 80s where our democracy was destroyed, but it was actually destroyed in 1950. In 1951, 1st of January, that's when the destruction of democracy happened. That was the day that the Legislative Council had their last meeting, stood in a circle, sang Old Lang Syne, then the national anthem, and then walked out of the room for the last time. I just have to keep talking about this because this conversation needs to be had. 1951 was the beginning. January the 1st, 1951, that was the beginning of the end of parliamentary democracy. And we live in a perceived democracy because we think that we think we're governed by democracy, but we're not, because the governance comes from Parliament. The governance of this country comes from the Executive Council. The Executive Council usurped the Legislative Council. So the legislation that has been enacted since 1951, we really need to go all the way back 70 odd years and review every piece of legislation that's been written in that time. Anything within there that does not benefit the people, it'll be removed. It'll be repealed, done and dusted, gone. Now you think about it. Every single minor party that's trying to get into Parliament, trying to get government seats, run on policies. But all of those policies are based on a massive amount of fraudulent policy, because the policies that these minor parties come up with are they're either uh, supporting policies that are already in place, or supporting legislation that's already happening, or else it's their counteraction to some legislation that's there. But this is the reason why the People's Opinion Party is not running on policy. We're running on intentions. And when you think about it, the people in this country, the voters in this country, are not as trusting as what they used to be. And so it may very well be that intentions are everything leading up to the general election of 2023. And when you think about it, you've got nothing to debate with any other minor party when you're not running on policy. Now, so intention is everything, and our first intention is to try and fix the legislative conundrum that we have in this country. Legislation being passed in the wee hours of the morning without public consultation and without any democratic process. I mean, you can't. That happens. That has happened. Don't even need to name the legislation that they've put into place and enacted without any approval from us. No consultation. This is a government that, for some reason, seems to be able to do what it wants and get away with it. I mean, why is this? Well, we know the answer, and we know what to do to fix the problem. The legislation that we have in this country, man, we go back 70 years, review everything, and start repealing legislation left, right, and centre. Then that's a whole new ball game. That's saying we're not going to play by the rules of the establishment. The rules of the establishment say you get a policy, you promote your policy, and the people will decide on your policy whether or not you should be in there enacting your policies into legislation. That's how the establishment plays this game. Yeah. So we're running on intentions. And there have been agreements that have been made by governments and government prime ministers and ministers with foreign state interests, the World Economic Forum, the International Pandemic Treaty, any agenda associated with United Nations. The people who signed those pacts, all right, they had no authority from us to sign us into some sort of binding law that had no democratic process. Agreements made between heads of state are only binding to the heads of state, the ones who signed the piece of paper. They're not binding to the people. And that's the deception. They make the agreement, and then they put the liability of the agreement onto the people, and we don't question it. Well, all of those international pacts will be dissolved based on the fact that the only ones who are responsible to it are the ones who signed the piece of paper. They have authority to, we give them a mandate to speak on our behalf, to represent us, but they have no mandate from us to commit us or our future generations to non-democratic agreements. None whatsoever. And yet they've done it. And they've been doing it for decades. So we'll be the repeal party. We'll be the referendum party. Tell you what, no one will do referendums like the People's Party will. So alongside all of that, and alongside all of our intentions, are aspects of reformation, to reform our legislation. And the reformation of legislation in this country would best be done via past syntax language. This is an international language that cannot be misinterpreted. You cannot make this language say something that it's not saying. It says it exactly as it is. There's no legalese or pages and pages of confusing stuff that we need to pay $500 an hour for somebody to interpret it to us. We can dispense with all of that. And it wouldn't be such a big job either, because there are literally dozens and dozens of pages in our legislation that is just a whole lot of legalese that says nothing. And those pages can be removed. We can go down to the nuts and bolts of every legislation in this country and rewrite it so that it can be simply understood by every single one of us. So there is a lot more to that number one intention. Our second intention is to investigate political corruption. And that is huge as well. We're going to find out some things that are going to be very, very unpleasant, that we will not want to have to face. But we must. If we're to move forward as a nation, as a country, we have to face the corruption. And if the people decide that this is what they want to do, if they want to get themselves into government, then we will be able to do that. Unfortunately, in order to do that, we have to control the Executive Council. And the Executive Council at the moment is being controlled not by our government. So it's a battlefield. It is them versus us. It's the establishment versus the people. And I tell you, what's happening right now is coming to its own time. And we're not the only ones talking about this. There are many people talking about this. What it is that we need to do to get the people into the power seats. So, our investigation won't stop. We will keep going until we've found everything. No stone unturned. Nothing will be too hard. When you're talking about political corruption spans across all the departments. It's not just things that happen at top level within government and beyond. It's everywhere. Conflict of interest, that's the first step into corruption. And it's a word, nobody likes to use that word, but it exists. Personally, I'm of the opinion that one man who needs to be investigated is the police commissioner. For what he was responsible for. We need to know who issued the order that turned our doctors into echo chambers of the one source of truth narrative. What happened there? All of our doctors, most of them, they just changed overnight. We need to know who was responsible and how did it happen. Honestly, the only way we're going to get this is for the people in this country to put aside their differences and just do whatever it takes to get the people, to get themselves into government, into the power seats. I keep saying this, 5% not enough, not aiming high enough. 10% still not high enough. We've got to get enough people into Parliament on election day to force National and Labour to form a coalition against the people. And that would be the first time we'd have some honesty in Parliament. Right, I'm going to stop this here. Those are the first two of 7 intentions, and we'll pick up the rest of it in the next one. Thank you.